Seville, the cradle of flamenco. Here in southern Spain, the dance has a long tradition. What's new and unusual about it here is the venue where it's being performed. A kind of giant sunshade. It's become the attraction in Seville. It's called the Metropole Parasol, and the city authorities hope it will draw even more international tourists. It was designed by architect Jürgen Meyer H. from Berlin. Jürgen Meyer H. is regarded as something of a trendsetter on the international architecture scene. Along with Marta Ramirez Iglesias and Andrés Santa, he drew up plans to rejuvenate a rundown plaza in Seville. The idea was to combine modern architecture with sustainable living.
Nowadays, sustainability is talked about in very limited terms, concentrating mainly on ecological aspects. But the Metropole Parasol project also emphasizes other aspects, such as cultural relevance. A project should also reflect a city's overall creative approach and its own potential for innovation.
Trees as providers of shade served as models for the blueprint. Shade plays an important role in Seville, where summers are hot. And not only the forms are innovative, the materials used are new too.
When the decision was finally made to build this great sculptural structure out of wood, everyone involved was very enthusiastic. One reason was that the wood comes from certified timber, in other words, from sustainable forestry. So it's a material that grows back, an ecological material. Another reason was that the wood does not heat up like metal, for example, and that new, strong timber-based materials allow us to create free forms in a cost-efficient way.
A structure like this had never been built before, so there were many unknowns to contend with. More than 3,000 elements from veneered plywood had to be combined in a complex three-dimensional structure. For the architects, it was groundbreaking work. Marta Ramirez Iglesias oversaw the building work on the site. It was the Spaniards' first major project.
We based our planning on a programmable surface, like a pixel matrix. Pixels are points of intersection that belong to a new language, a new medium of communication. These pixels can pop up, combine and unite and assume different shapes. The pixels are components of the matrix and grow from the ground up.
Even the supporting sections are made of fine spruce elements. A layer of polyurethane renders the wood weather-resistant. But to give it the required structural stability, a new technique had to be developed.
The joining elements, such as the threaded bolts, were also treated with adhesive. A heating process made the adhesive extra strong. This technique, using extra heat-resistant adhesive, makes the structure capable of withstanding the very high summer temperatures in Seville, of up to 50 degrees Celsius.
The wooden superstructure covers some 3,000 square meters and plays host to all kinds of cultural events. Today's program promises free flamenco lessons for all comers. Riyadh, 5,000 kilometers to the southeast. The capital of Saudi Arabia is also the country's economic and cultural hub. The oil boom has transformed this once remote desert oasis into a rapidly growing metropolis. There are construction sites dotted all over the city, and it is Western architects who have given Riyadh its modern face. Now, a new landmark is being built in the city center. The King Fahd National Library is to become Riyadh's cultural centerpiece. It's being built by a team of architects from the German city of Dortmund.
Our reaction to the city planning environment here was to build something that is both exciting and relaxing. Something that stands out by being able to create a breathing space, a space for reflection within the fabric of the city.
Thomas Lücking has been involved in building the library for more than 10 years now. He spent several of these years living in Riyadh. Until recently, energy-efficient construction methods were practically unheard of in Saudi Arabia. That could change with the construction of the new National Library. The hot desert climate can make daily life in the region difficult, so it's all the more important that buildings have a pleasant indoor temperature. To make this possible, the National Library received a special form of cladding.
If you don't want a mirrored facade, you have to figure out a different kind of protection from the sun. What we did was go back to traditional forms of construction, such as tents, membranes, textiles, curtain wall facings, and so on. We developed a separate sun shield facade, which we hung over the glass facade. It's a bit like a feather cloak or a bird puffing up its feathers. The sun that beats down from above is blocked off completely, but when you're inside, you can look down and you've got a clear view of outside.
That way, the architects were able to avoid high costs for air conditioning. Inside the building, a displacement ventilation system saves more money. Cooled air is fed in slowly at floor level only, saving the necessity to cool the entire volume of the huge reading hall. Behind frosted panes, a separate library is being built on the first floor. Men are usually not allowed in here.
We're in the women's library now. It's a separate area for women and children. It's also only about a quarter of the size of the men's library. Of course, this was an issue for us, one which we had to address. We also had to obscure the women's area from the men's view. So we developed a modern ornament for the window panes, portraying falling leaves. It's part of a reference to the theme of Arcadian landscapes.
The architects had to get used to their new working conditions and the general environment. Half the population of Saudi Arabia lives behind a veil. Women are not allowed to drive cars, travel, work, or marry without the consent of their male guardians. Saudi Arabia is the home of Wahhabism, a particularly strict form of Islam. To this day, this square is used for public executions. Western music and alcohol are forbidden. There's hardly any tourism. The country is only slowly opening up to the outside world. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia laid out strict ground rules for the construction of the new library, insisting on the preservation of an older building from the 1980s.
Wish to see it. Hopefully these days we have a chance to switch it.
The idea of preserving existing buildings runs contrary to the philosophy behind groundbreaking, spectacular architecture. Most architects find the idea of constructing new buildings while preserving old ones unattractive. Eckhard Gerber, founder of Gerber Architects in Dortmund, accepted the challenge. And it was the older building that inspired his ecological design for a new one.
Das ist eben ein nachhaltiges Konzept.
It's a sustainable concept because by placing the older building at the central point and cloaking it with a new building, we were surrounding it like the smaller parts of a Russian Matryoshka doll, giving it total protection from the climate outside. Furthermore, to me, sustainability means preserving older buildings. These are resources which have already been used, and we can't just tear them down and throw them away. We should be using them again and again.
China, on the other hand, is turning toward new, more imposing styles of architecture, like in Dalian, in the northeast of China. The city by the Yellow Sea is a popular destination for Chinese tourists. 6 million people live in the greater metropolitan area. The city is also one of the country's biggest commercial hubs. But Dalian wants to shake off its image as an ugly industrial city and finally attract international tourists. A modern city quarter is being built at the container port with the Dalian International Conference Center on the new quays. It's a futuristic building with an energy concept that uses wind, seawater, and sunlight. It's being built by the architect Wolfgang Prix and his team from Austria. Prix is something of a maverick who's famous for his extravagant designs. Just the right man to help Dalian attract attention.
Our brief was to build a conference center. Then a second, more important remit was added, namely to build an opera house within the conference center. Then we knew what our real task was, to build a commercial conference center with a cultural heart, the opera house.
For the opera house, the architects had to meet certain aesthetic and acoustic criteria.
Das ist der Boden, sieht man hier ganz gut an, ne? Der Achsraster ist verschoben. Wir sind auf der Baustelle etwas daneben gegangen leider.
The venue is to be used not just for opera performances, but also for pop concerts and theater productions. The Grand Theater has room for 1,700 spectators. One of the novelties is a flexible stage wall which can be opened if needed. Behind it is an enormous function room. That makes a wide range of uses possible without additional expense. It was back in 1968 that Wolfgang Prix founded the architecture firm with the exotic name Coop Himmelblau. The Austrian has realized his utopian ideas in many countries. Dalian is currently one of his biggest projects. He sees architecture as art and says it should be at the cutting edge.
All our buildings have extremely distinctive forms. That may alienate the beholder at first, but like all strange things, when you've gotten used to it, you see the advantages of the unusual. So people remember the building, they can describe it. That way, people take emotional possession of a building.
China is building its future at a breathtaking pace, but the country is facing a dilemma. Climate change makes sustainability essential in both commerce and construction. That's why cost-efficient and ecological architecture is expressly called for in the latest 5-year plan. The Dalian Conference Center boasts a complex energy design, as it's called in the trade. Solar cells on the roof supply the building with electricity. In the summer, The temperatures can reach tropical heights. For the purpose of cooling, the architects decided to take advantage of its location by the water. Today, a giant pump system is being installed. It's a big moment for the architect in charge, Wolfgang Reicht.
We have a unique opportunity here to use the seawater to cool our building. We pump cold seawater, which stays at a constant temperature all year round, into an underground storage tank. From there it goes to a heat exchange system, from which it is then pumped into the building's interior via a separate circuit. That circuit feeds concrete elements, floors and walls, which gradually but steadily cool the building.
Light shafts in the ceiling allow as much sunlight as possible inside. Flexible vents also allow wind in, providing for natural ventilation. A perforated aluminum skin offers protection from the direct sun. But the architects aim to take ecological building a step further.
The real goal is to eventually construct buildings that are self-sufficient, that supply themselves with energy, so to speak, and, if possible, generate more energy than they use themselves. They would function as urban power plants. That, I think, is the next step.
Und das, glaube ich, ist der nächste Schritt.
To Berlin, where Dortmund-based architect Eckhard Gerber has opened a new office. From here, international projects are coordinated. He, Thomas Lücking, and other colleagues are preparing for their next trip to Riyadh, where they're building a museum on the topic of the environment and nature. Since the architecture firm won the competition for the National Library, it has secured more contracts in Saudi Arabia. Eckhard Gerber had to do a lot of persuading to get his clients to buy into energy-efficient architecture.
Sustainability is a bit of a problem in Saudi Arabia. People are skeptical. Energy is dirt cheap, and people don't think sustainability is necessary here. No need for natural ventilation when you've got air conditioning that costs next to nothing. But when you spend some time here, you realize that it can't last forever, that the time will come when the oil is used up.
Saudi Arabia has yet to enact binding regulations on insulation or ecological architecture. But the Saudis, too, will have to rethink their approach in the future. The Prince Salman Science Oasis, built by Gerber Architects, wants to make its own contribution to that process. The museum is aimed at raising awareness of environmental issues among children, young people, and their families. The museum will feature various interactive exhibits focusing on topics such as Earth, water, life, technology, and space. For example, visitors can board a spaceship or dive beneath the surface of the water. The concept for the interactive displays was drawn up by the Berlin-based firm Triad. It aims to teach visitors about energy-saving technologies in a fun way, although they are a serious and important aspect of architecture.
This is a solar updraft tower. The sun heats up air which rises in the tower and powers a turbine that generates electricity. This will be demonstrated very nicely in the main hall. Visitors can walk into the tower, look up, and see the turbine revolving. That way, the exhibit is actually part of the architecture and a landmark feature of the Science Oasis.
The architects aim to draw attention to the topic of landscapes. The building is on the fringe of a wadi. wadis are typical features of the local landscape. They're dried-out riverbeds that sometimes fill up with rainwater in the winter. The biggest one is the Wadi Hanifa, which runs around Riyadh.
The landscape aspect of the Wadi Hanifa became a focal point of the architecture of the Science Center because it runs right up to the main entrance of our building and gradually rises step by step. We incorporated this step-by-step effect into our plans so that we could create a connection between the landscape of the Wadi and the architecture of the Science Center.
Zwischen dem Thema des Wadis haben und der Architektur des Science Centers.
But progress on the building is slow. Most of the laborers come from Bangladesh or Pakistan. Scorching heat and strict prayer times put a stop to work on the site several times a day. Nobody can say exactly when the museum will be ready to open. Back to Seville. The medieval city is one of Europe's most fascinating cultural destinations. And now it's got another magnet for tourists. The Metropole Parasol is located in the middle of the old town on the Plaza de la Encarnacion. The plaza has a rich and varied history. It was once the site of a medieval monastery, which was later turned into a market hall. When that was demolished, the plaza was left to languish as a car park.
The competition for redesigning the Plaza de la Encarnacion in Seville was aimed at creating a vibrant urban setting for the 21st century. But it's also supposed to function as a window on the city's history, with its Roman ruins, and give it back its old function as a market hall.
These ruins from the Roman era were found during excavation work for the new project. They were preserved and incorporated into the design and now function as an antiquarium in the basement of the building. The district's residents are now served by a new weekly market on the ground floor of the Metropole Parasol. And on the roof overlooking the square is a boardwalk offering spectacular views of the city skyline. As a construction project, the oversized parasol was as controversial as they come. There was no shortage of criticism during the building phase. The architects were accused of aesthetic insensitivity and a lack of respect for Seville's cultural treasures.
I think the criticism was perfectly normal. We've built something very unusual in the center of the historic old town in Seville. People need time to digest it and accept this building for themselves.
Meanwhile, the mushrooms, as the locals call them, have put down roots. They've become a fixture of the city's cultural life. Even Seville's Philharmonic Orchestra has done the honors here, and the concert evening was well attended.
It's a great feeling to see people using and enjoying this plaza. They like what we were trying to achieve with this open space. It's like an open-air cathedral for the people of Seville.
Be they in Seville, Riyadh, or Dalian, cultural venues are special places throughout the world. If they're a success, they can become icons themselves, leaving their marks on cities for decades. That gives architects a special responsibility to create great, beautiful, functional, and ecological buildings.